Hello everyone. Welcome in. Um, Man, do I have just a doozy of a day, at least in my opinion. I've been learning a lot, about our greatest ally and just trying to understand better. And it was so weird. It's so weird how the universe works, so strange. I had I had a customer come in this week and um, was talking about the chips in the new phones, and he was debating whether or not to get a phone, right? And I'm not even kidding you. I think verbatim, he said, "I am not getting a 17E. The chips are made in Israel." And I was like, "What? What are you talking about?" No, they're not. Like, the phones are made in like India and Taiwan, and they're assembled in California, quote unquote. All these things. I'm like, that can't be right, I've been in this industry for so long, and I have never heard of something like that. Literally been in the industry for a decade now, and I have never heard of Israel's involvement in in the Apple phone, right? And so I had to Google it. I was like, I think I asked Google, does Israel make the 17E or just like something like that? And essentially, Google said no, that the phone isn't made in Israel, but the research and development team and one of their biggest headquarters is located in Israel. And I was like, what? What? I about lost it in the store. I had a little internal meltdown on the inside because I had to given somebody wrong information, because I definitely want to speak the truth, and I always want to tell people the truth, and I want to know things, and so the fact that I was wrong shocked me, and so I had to go do some research. I had to understand a little bit better. And I was actually so surprised to find that Apple's research and development team has been there since like 2013. They acquired some companies, and we'll go through it today, but essentially they acquired some companies, and facial recognition, the Face ID, has been developed like through the acquisition, and with all the things, the chips in the devices, the M1 and the M2 chips were developed in Israel, right? So I was actually so shocked, uh, and I've told a couple people, and they've all had the same reaction as me, and they're like, "Oh, I'm switching my phone. Oh, I'm switching." And I don't think one big corporate company is better than another, but like at least Google's been around since I was born, 1998, and they already have all my information. I had a Samsung phone before I ever had an Apple phone, and I know Apple already has my information, but I didn't know, and all of this stuff is coming to light. It's the craziest thing. And so today, that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the relationship of Apple with Israel, or Israel with Apple, however we want to spin that. Um, but I was just shook. I've seen Apple with all these various names, that also have ties to Israel and things. So why didn't I put those pieces together? But we're here for it, right? And we're learning together, and we're unfolding together. So it's kind of cool. So let's get into it. So there are it's the second largest. I think I made a mistake at the beginning. It's the second largest research and development center outside of the U.S. Okay, so U.S. I assume is number one, but number two is in Israel, and their primary facilities are in Herzliya, uh, Haifa, and Jerusalem. I might have said that second one wrong. But those are the primary facilities, and this team focuses primarily around hardware architectures, semiconductors, flash storage, and advanced sensor processing algorithms. And they have a 75,000 square foot facility. Their leader's name is Johnny Sroja. I'm not going to be able to say some of these names, obviously. He is an Israeli native and Apple's Senior Vice President of Hardware and Technologies. He is one of the most powerful executives at Apple and directly commands their global silicon and microchip pipeline. The hardware to OS pipeline, this team designs the physical silicon and the mathematical sensor arrays that feed critical data to the operating system's kernel. This directly enables core software features like biometric security and spatial computing. And so that's like, that has to do with your Face ID. We're going to get into it in just a little bit how they acquired a company that used our biometrics and then turned it into Face ID, and so I wonder if there's some like conspiracy behind why that is and why Apple acquired that company, So I thought it was really interesting. So an acquisition, right, and this is where a company purchases either the majority or the entirety of another company's shares and assumes operational control. And this could be intellectual property, right, ideas, could be patents, this could be scientific talent, intellectual property is just the exclusive legal ownership of existing patents and proprietary algorithms. They also do time to market reduction, which is eliminating internal research development timelines by purchasing commercially viable pre-existing technology. And so I found three major examples of this acquisition, right, that Apple has done. The first one was in PrimeSense. Sorry, I had to figure out where the company was. And so they invented the 3D optical mapping and motion tracking hardware, and this was used in the Xbox Kinect. With the Apple integration, they miniaturized the 3D sensing hardware components and to fit inside a mobile phone, right? Or a mobile phone bezel. And in 2017, with the iPhone X, True Depth Camera, this projects 30,000 invisible infrared dots to create a mathematical mesh of the user's face, powering the secure authentication layers of Face ID across iOS and iPad OS. And I knew some of these things. I'm not super I want to focus on sales. I think talking to people is great. That's where I thrive, is the face-to-face and the connection part, and I've always struggled, but I always knew that Face ID was supposed to be super secure, because the way it was explained to me was it was supposed to be as secure as having 1,000-character password on your phone because of the dot, the infrared dots, because of the scanning sensors. And so it's kind of, I don't know if it's me being paranoid, but it almost makes me not want to use Face ID anymore now that I know all these things. Um, so another acquisition that they did was Anabit, and this was in 2011. PrimeSense was in 2013. Anabit was in 2011. I should have switched them, but whatever. And this was about memory chips. And so the prior technology developed the memory signal process, the MSP, memory signal processing controllers for flash memory chips. What Apple integration did is they integrated it onto Apple's custom system on chip architects. And so what that did was it prevented performance degradation as storage drives age. This hardware level optimization ensures high-speed read and write capabilities and allowing the OS to load applications rapidly and stream large data files while minimizing battery draw. The current frontier is Apple's Vision Pro and Vision OS. It says the Israeli hardware teams leverage their 3D sensing and chip design expertise to develop the core tracking infrastructure for spatial computing. OS implementation, they designed the precision algorithms for real-time eye tracking, hand gesture recognition, and spatial environment mapping that drives Vision OS. And so, I mean, that's like when your head moves and your eyes move, and when you're wearing the VR goggles, that's tracking all of those things. I would assume if you have like a watch, how you have like the taps, that probably has something to do with the hand gestures. I've never tested out one of the Vision Pro things, so I don't quite know. I've done VR before, but I've never done the Vision Pro. Personally, it seems kind of dumb if you can't do all the things to me, but to each their own. Some people love that. And essentially, this also drives efficiency in the device. I would assume this is how the older phones can have apps for so long, because it used to not be like that, but now I think it's like 7 to 10 years, depending on model that you have, that you can maintain the apps, and not necessarily the iOS, but you can still do your apps and things like that. And most recently, in 2026, in January of 2026, they also had the second largest acquisition from an Israeli startup. The company is called Q.ai, and it was bought for about $2 billion. He was founded, it says the founder of Q.ai was founded by Aviad Mazels, and it's the exact same engineer who previously founded PrimeSense and sold it to Apple to create Face ID. So same guy that has already probably made millions and billions created another thing and sold it to Apple, right? Just I don't know, keep it in the family, seems like. I don't know. Q.ai is built on an AI system that tracks microscopic and involuntary movements in human facial skin. This allows future Apple hardware to understand whispered or entirely silent speech, as well as read real-time biometrics like heart rate. The technology is being actively integrated into upcoming AirPods, iPhones, and Vision Pro headsets. And so I'm going to have to do a little, because I just found that today. I was like, what is, I randomly asked the question. I was like, what is something more recent, right? I'm so surprised that it went so old when I was researching first, but what is something more recent? And this came up. And so I thought, oh, that's a little bit scary. Like, how are you're tracking involuntary movements now? What does that mean? What? I always, now that I'm getting older, I'm always like, what can you do that's like malicious with that information? How could you use that information maliciously or against somebody? Because we know that our data can be bought, right, and sold to whoever at this point, and they can track our location, which we'll get in here shortly. Because I needed just a little bit more information for the show. I needed it to be just a little bit longer, and I said, okay, so let's double down, right? But with that being said, the pipeline for this is product conceptualization and high-level eco-set design in Cupertino, California. Number 2 is foundational semiconductor engineering and sensor math in Israel. And 3, hardware component manufacturing and assembly across the globe. And so those are your main components, or those are where your main assemblies are for the iPhone. And I thought that was really interesting because I always thought it was something completely else. And maybe it was at one point, and things change, but I think Taiwan, India, Cupertino, California, and Israel were the main people that came together in forming the iPhone. And so in terms of other products, other than the iPhone and maybe some of the watch features, the Israeli team, research and development team, were also they were part of designing the M1 and the M2 chips. And this breakthrough allowed Apple to completely cut ties with Intel and move Macs to in-house Apple silicon. So I guess that was a win for them, but I don't know why it makes me so uncomfortable these days that Israeli has a hand in our internal workings of the phone. In terms of the Vision Pro, they heavily designed the coprocessor, the R1 coprocessor, which is the second brain of the headset. The R1 processor data has 12 cameras, 5 sensors, 6 microphones, and simultaneously to eliminate lag and prevent user motion sickness. The AI server infrastructure, this handled cloud-based artificial intelligence features across iOS. This engineering branch builds Apple's custom AI server chips as well. In terms of talent absorption, along with those acquisitions, Apple scaled up its local headcount by aggressively hiring hundreds of displaced engineers from Intel's downsizing regional offices. Cross-border output, Apple also operates and funds a specialized engineering hub in Ramallah, Palestine, to expand its regional development workforce. The supply chain catch, this is a vital technical distinction. Israel designs the architectural blueprints for these chips, but Apple remains 100% reliant on Taiwan's TSMC to physically manufacture and print the actual device. So I thought that's really kind of interesting to know. Like, yes, they're relying on each other, but one's hardware, one's more integrated and in this, like, the specifics of the software and developing that, and so I just gives them more vulnerability to do something in the software. Somebody was bringing up how Apple used to be, maybe it still is, who knows what's real and what's not, that they used to be the most secure, but at some point the government subpoenaed documents from Apple or location information on an individual, and I don't know if that changed things. I don't know I don't know the specifics behind it. That was something that was just brought up in conversation this week, and I'm going to learn more about it, but it just kind of makes you wonder various things. Some other kind of interesting facts to know in terms of with Israel, our greatest ally. There's been some policy shifts, in the administration. There have been things that have really never happened before, and so we're going to kind of go over the FARA filing sheets and the DOJ policy shift. So some of the core players in the FARA filings and the policy shift are obviously Pam Bondi. That's a big one. She was one of the ones that made the decision the first day she was in office in her role. There's a couple Israeli foreign affairs chief of staff agents. So this would specifically Chief of Staff Eran Shalvich, the U.S. agent Show by Faceworks LLC, and that's a marketing firm based in San Diego, run by Chad Schittinger, head of California chapter of the Faith and Freedom Coalition. The legal enabler, that's the U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi. The key dates in question were February 5th and in late September as well. The FARA filing, the money is about estimated $3.26 million to $4 million in initial public relations contract, and that's funded directly to the Israeli government. The goal, what the money portion of this is to combat cratering public approval ratings of Israel among Gen Z and younger American evangelical Christians. The deliverables, what they wanted, right? The contract requires the production of 100 media ads, content pieces per month, and 5,000 distinct localized text or push notifications. It also funds a traveling mobile museum trailer displaying high-intensity October 7th footage in church parking lots and college campuses. Which I understand, being in the know, but if you've seen any of the October 7th footage, I don't know if it's the most appropriate to just be out there, sharing to children, in public. I would assume if that had a rating, that would be rated R, yes, we need to be informed, but it's not your job to go and show those things to people, right? It's my job to be informed. People at those schools, they have teachers that should be teaching them things, There's a time and a place for things, but I also don't think American propaganda and why Israel's so great is appropriate either. So, but that's just my opinion. So another thing that I was learning about, and the first time I ever heard this was when Charlie Kirk got assassinated, and they were talking about like geofencing people's phones and knowing how many people were there and in the area because of these geofencing. And I thought that was really interesting that they were allowed to do that, and it's not necessarily that the churches are doing it, but the data is being harvested. And I don't know a lot about data harvesting and how that's done, but church geofencing and church targeting is a real thing. So with the FARA filing, right, the 86-page FARA filing explicitly listed a database of over 900 specific American megachurches and Christian colleges across the Southwest, primarily in California, Arizona, Colorado, and Nevada, including major institutions like Grand Canyon University. The firm draws virtual GPS perimeter, a geofence, around the exact property boundaries of these churches. The system activates specifically during Sunday morning worship times, or maybe Wednesdays, right? Whenever service times are like actively going. When churchgoers' phones ping local cell towers or location-based apps inside that boundary, their unique mobile ad IDs are harvested. The system automatically tracks those specific devices and floods their personal social media feeds, text messages, and apps with pro-Israel and anti-Palestinian media. So it's a little scary, and I don't know if I've personally been a part of one of these harvest episodes or whatever we're calling them, right? But that's scary that people are allowed to do that. I don't know how it's legal. I'm glad Idaho wasn't on one of those. I'm not saying that they're not, but I'm kind of glad I didn't see that on there. There has been backlash amongst the churches because they have to specify, it's not them doing it. It's not them conducting the surveillance and the advertising, but they're the physical target of a foreign state. And their dad, isn't that crazy? They have to tell their parishioners, hey, this isn't us. We're under attack. This isn't us. It's absolutely crazy to me. I don't understand the mechanics behind it, but it absolutely makes me uncomfortable. And so one thing that was kind of weird, right, was Israel never ever filed under FARA, whatever FARA I think it's called. It's Foreign Agents Registration Act is what it stands for. And so it's just really interesting, Pam Bondi's in, Charlie Kirk dies, there's FARA registrations, and now we have documents saying that there is going to be propaganda sent to Americans. We're seeing it at churches, And so I wanted to understand a little bit about what Pam Bondi did, And so on her very first day, Bondi issued a formal National Security Division memorandum that completely restructured FARA, or the Foreign Agent Registration Act. This disbanded the Fluent Influence Task Force. She dissolved the elite specialized DOJ unit tasked with tracking and cracking down on covert foreign propaganda operations inside the U.S., decriminalized non-espionage FARA, which this memo explicitly ordered federal prosecutors not to pursue criminal charges for FARA violations unless the conduct mirrors traditional espionage, or that just means stealing the state's secret or military assets. It was downgraded to civil enforcement. She mandated that FARA unit limit its focus entirely to civil compliance, administrative oversight, and regulatory guidance. The loophole: under U.S. law, the DOJ has incredibly weak civil FARA powers. It cannot issue independent civil fines. Its primary civil tool is simply suing an entity to force them to retroactively file paperwork. And so, essentially, what all that means, right, to keep it simple, is it's just easier to push American propaganda. And it's just easier for various countries to influence us, if they so please, And so I thought it was just so interesting that that we're even having these conversations. Like, I thought the Trump administration was here for the people. I thought, we were going to make a real change, a real difference. But the more I do research and the more I'm uncovering, and I'm not so sure. I don't, even with like the JE files, right? I just watched the Sean Ryan episode where he had two people on, where they showed evidence. One of them at least showed evidence of why he believes JE is still alive, right? Like, between documents that were in a jail cell, between the way he moved his money 48, 72 hours before his quote-unquote suicide, the lack of video evidence, the fact that there was never a suicide in 21 years, right? There was even footage of drone footage that somebody took. It was almost 3 hours worth of footage, and at one portion in the video, you could see somebody stick their head out. Older dude, face was fuzzy, just drone footage. And, but it kind of looks like him, right? And so I think with everything, with all the JE stuff, with the Charlie Kirk stuff, with the Israeli stuff, I think, like, it has to all be connected, right? I will go as far as even like Diddy, right, was connected with these people, and what he did was connect, because it's all coming out around the same time, and I know JE, there was stuff in 2007 that came out, and he went to jail, but did he really go to jail? He was able to get out, do whatever he wanted. I think he got out early even, and he wasn't even there. I don't know. I think it's all connected, and we're missing a piece, and maybe Israel is that piece, but there might even be more that's connected. The more I research and the more I understand kind of the political behind the scenes, the more I want to get involved, right? And the more I want to tell people, and the more I want to change the system. But it almost kind of feels it's like an uphill battle, and it can be very intimidating. And you ask yourself, how can you influence change? How can you do these things? And I just have to keep thinking to myself, like the conversation that I had a week ago with that gentleman, maybe it was 2 weeks ago, right? Just keep talking. Just keep getting out there. Tell people about what's going on. If you hear something from somebody that you're like, oh my gosh, that's crazy. No, I've been doing this for 10 years. I've never heard of anything like that, right? And it was there even before I began in the industry, right? Apple and Israel were already entangled. So it's not new knowledge, right? It's old knowledge that's just coming to light, and we're just coming out, And maybe that means I switch back to my Google Pixel. I love the Google Pixel. It's a great phone, right? It's really good. I love it. But that is only because Apple has not been upfront and honest. It almost feels like it's been hidden. And the fact that in 2026, right, there was another back-end deal, Q.AI, that tracks involuntary movements in human facial skin, and it allows hardware to understand whispered or entirely silent speech. Like, if that doesn't sound scary to you, I don't know what sounds scary. because that means, okay, I don't know, say there's some sort of AI takeover, or the government falls, and we all have little tracking devices. They make boxes and bags and stuff that like bug this, or like whatever, they cuts the signal, or things like that. But what if it didn't, like, what if it could see your little movement? What if it could essentially lip read, right? What if, I don't know, it just seems so scary, and it opens up the potential for, I think, malicious behavior. And we know corporate companies, politicians, most celebrities and things like that, they do not have our best interest in mind. They have their pocket's best interest in mind, their sponsors' best interest in mind, their managers, their donors, all these things, their best interest in mind. But what about the people? And the people make up the majority of society. And I think we just need to band together. We need to band together. We need to boycott. We need to bring light to things that have been around for years and years that nobody knows. I think I need to listen more, and maybe I would have known. But it's just crazy that a customer comes in to see me and it's like, I don't want this. I had no idea what I was going to do for this week's episode, and it just happened. I don't want this because the chips are made in Israel specifically, and what does that mean for the next iPhone? Does that mean all the chips are going to be made in Israel and developed by the research and development team in Israel? I don't know. It just seems Israel's popping up a lot. They're filing for our registrations. They are outwardly saying, hey, we are going to push millions of dollars into American propaganda, which I'm sure they were already doing before, but it's outwardly in our face. The Jeffrey Epstein stuff, the JE stuff that our politicians are obviously involved with, but nothing happening with that, The Tyler Robinson, like, we know that it either wasn't just Tyler Robinson or it wasn't him at all. Because there's no way. It was a 30-6. There's no way one person was able to do that, right? That was a team. That was a team takedown, right? But yeah, everybody needs to get involved. Everybody needs to start doing research. We need to start looking deeper into things. I need to start looking deeper into. I tell myself I think I'm smarter. I try to keep myself informed. I try to learn about things, and I was not informed. And so I think we need to help each other, right? Talk to each other, have good conversations, right? Put the phone down. Be done with it, because it doesn't matter. Obviously they want our data. Obviously they want to track us, right, with the geofencing. Can we talk about the geofencing for a second? So I first heard about this when Charlie Gart got assassinated, right? And they were like, yeah, the geofencing and the tracking, I didn't really understand that, right? But the fact that it's legal for a foreign agent to geofence a property and then be able to harvest their data and to be able to spam them with whatever they want, I think that's absolutely crazy. And it should be illegal. Like, you should not be able to, like, the only way I can think of a geofence is, like, when I go to clock in at work, I have a geofence clock-in system. It's Face ID, and it's a geofence clock-in system, right? And so I have to be in a certain proximity of the location, and I have to do my face exactly how they say that they want it to be done. And I understand why they do it. Still a little intrusive, but whatever. And that's the only way I could think of geofencing, right? And so when I put this into the same idea, right, but just at a church without the Face ID, it just makes me uncomfortable because you don't go to church to get your data harvested. The fact that we even have a data harvesting, you're harvesting my data. You don't go to church to have your data harvested and then for them to push their ideals, their ideologies, And the fact that these churches have to say, hey, like, we're under attack of a foreign agent, they're doing XYZ, that's even crazier. Because they know. And I just don't know how we stop it. I think we have to get involved. We all have to be more aware of these things so we know how to stop it and where they're getting the data information and how they're collecting it. I think that is a good piece of information to have, that you can be geofenced and you can be targeted just based off the location that you're at. And maybe that's how you get some spam text messages or emails or whatever, is because of the location that you're not necessarily like somebody has sold your data, but it's been harvested from something. And so I never knew that. I never knew that your data could be harvested, and that's just a scary idea, right? Not only are they going to start tracking our micro movements and what we're saying without being able, like, with just our movements, it's incredible, but it's incredibly scary, It's very fantastic and scary all at the same time. Yeah. I do hope that you enjoyed today's episode. I hope you learned a little bit about our greatest ally and about your Apple device that you're probably watching me on. I know I have several of them in my house, so they have my face, they have my fingerprint, they have all of my notes that I share, which is supposed to be private, but who knows if it's actually private, So the question is do I move away from Apple? Do I go into Google and just give them to a big conglomerate that I know has been collecting my information since the dawn of their existence? Do I go back to I don't really want to go back to my Samsung. I think I'm over the Samsung life. They're made by China or whatever. I just don't know anymore. Get rid of the whole thing. Throw it in the garbage. Don't have a cellular device. That's probably the real solution, but we do not live in that world. But that was it for today. I truly do hope you enjoyed and you learned something. If you see today's episode and you want to learn anything, put it down in the comments. Always looking for those things. And if you did like the episode, learned something, you didn't like the episode, drop a like, a dislike, whatever your prerogative is. And, hopefully I'll see you next week, and share this with people if you want them to know about Israel and Apple and how they're tied together and how their research and development team are tied together and how long, just inform people. But as always, have a great Monday, and we'll see you next time.